Good morning, everybody. We're just loading all of our attendees onto the call. So we'll give it 15 to 20 seconds before we get rolling as everybody slowly drops in and gets connected. Fantastic. I think I'll get started now. So welcome everybody. Good afternoon or good morning, good evening. We have attendees joining us once again from everywhere and all over the globe today. I think last time I looked at our attendee list, we had 32 different countries who were joining us. So welcome to everybody to this special webinar today based around the importance of safety and security in your maritime facilities. We have a lot to pack into the session today, so I'm going to fire through the opening before we get started and our guest speaker comes on to talk to us all today. So very quick, a little bit of webinar protocol for everybody who's joined. You are in fact all muted. However, you're always able to type questions in Zoom. There are Q&A sections both on the desktop and the mobile app. So please make sure, rather than putting any questions into the chat box, please make sure you put them in the Q&A box. This way we can get to them as we progress through the session. Everybody will receive a follow-up email post the session, which will contain the recording and links to any of the resources that we've mentioned. There'll be a few of them this week because both ourselves and our guest speaker has quite a lot of references that we want to make sure you receive post the session. And there is a survey at the end of the webinar. It's a quick 4-question survey. It opens up in a separate browser. We'd really appreciate your feedback. It helps us plan and prepare for our webinars as we move forward over the coming weeks and months. So today's agenda, some very quick introductions before we go into the security and safety webinar, where we're going to cover off a whole host of topics today. Everything from crime stats to the use of drones to getting grant programs and support for your safety and security on site, as well as training. So lots to cover off. There will be 2 polls within the session today. When these polls pop up, please make sure you just come back to your screens and participate. Like I said, these polls help us generate feedback and understanding of who we have on the call and how we may be able to support you going forward. And like I said, with regards to Q&A, there is a Q&A box, but please, if you throw questions in throughout the session, we will try and get to them as well as process them at the end. So very quickly, the 2 presenters today. So I'm your host for this session. My name is Michael Short. I'm Head of Marketing here at Midstream Lighting. I've got over 10 years experience working within marketing within different sectors, including home automation, finance, and the automotive sector. And I'm here at Midstream running the marketing division to help us grow and progress our brand across all our key sectors. But more importantly today, I want to introduce you to our main presenter, who is Captain Fred Wilder. He's our Senior Advisor in Maritime here at Midstream Lighting. So Fred, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Well, thank you very much, Michael, and welcome everyone. It's indeed a pleasure to be here with you today. I always take this as a great opportunity to share with those around me that how important it is to keep the maritime environment a safe place in which we can all operate. And that's what it's all about today, and maybe sharing a few things with you about what we do in the United States and how we can translate that, what we can do globally. I'll rely on my over 35 years of experience in the Coast Guard and government affairs and operations, and we'll have a good time together. Thank you, Michael.
No problem, Fred. You're being very understated about your background and experience, but as we go through, I'm sure some of your career highlights will pop up as well. So very quickly, because we do have people who've joined the webinar who don't know potentially who Midstream Lighting are. We have lots of partners who have joined, but for those who don't, very quickly, at a glance in 60 seconds, Midstream Lighting are a specialist manufacturer of high-mast LED floodlighting systems and solutions. And we both design and manufacture our own products for the sports, maritime, aviation and horticulture sectors. We manufacture our products here in the UK as well as in Romania in Europe. it gives us a superior level of quality and allows us to export globally at speed. A lot of our projects need to be done at pace around the world. Our products are extremely unique, and they have proprietary optics, and they're designed specifically for the environments that they were built for. And when I say that, it means that we're specialists, not generalists. So the focus of our lighting is to really go after those niche areas, whether it's airport aprons, whether it's port container terminals, crane lighting. It is built precisely for those environments. We're really proud to have an amazing R&D team based in our Italian headquarters, which is where all of our engineering and design support also comes from. And we don't just manufacture the products, we also offer solutions into these industries, whether it's the lighting design, maintenance support on rebates and grants, training, education. We really see ourselves as not just a manufacturer, but a thought leader and solution provider as well. Of course, you can get lots more information on Midstream Lighting on our website, midstreamlighting.com. But that's enough from me. I'm going to hand straight over now to Fred, who's going to kick off the session on the importance of security and safety in your maritime facilities. Fred, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Michael. I appreciate it, and we'll jump right in and talk about the marine transportation system in the United States with 361 public ports, deep water ports, over 3,000 waterside facilities that accommodate thousands of cargo and passenger vessels every day. 95% of our trade overseas by weight goes through these ports and facilities. And if you think about a seaport, you think of the various facilities on the port, and I've listed some of them there. In the picture, you'll see that's the ports of LA, Long Beach, but you can see that the many different things that are handled in a port. And so if we take a look just at a cargo facility, for instance, they can handle material which falls into break bulk facilities like grains or packaged sacks, cartons, crates, or pallets. But probably the most familiar thing to you and the most common type of facility in a port that you would think of as far as cargo would be containers. And that's just a quick picture there of the I think the port of New Orleans. So if we take also important to us in our work here in the seaports in the U.S. or our passenger facilities. And passenger facilities can include both cruise terminals and ferry terminals. Cruising is a major tourism industry in the United States, and there are millions of people each year that visit these facilities. So it's important for us to recognize these facilities and the importance of security in them. In a ferry facility, the difference being that you have in the cruise facility, you're always interested in the large numbers of people, but in the ferry facility, you also think about people, vehicles, and certain amounts of cargo. And I think that's, if you see there in the picture, that's on our west coast in the port of Seattle. So if we continue to look down and we think about our facilities, we think about the seaport as a place where all of this comes together as far as cargo. And I like to call this the intermodal cargo transport gathering, if you will, gathering of trains, trucks, and ships. And it's important to recognize that all of this comes together on the seaport. It's all important. It all needs to be secure and safe. And of course, this is where the goods actually get transported into the interior of our country and eventually end up on the shelves, so that the products end up on the shelves for our consumers. Anytime you have cargo and you have these types of things, you're going to have the risk of theft. It's important for us to recognize that this exists in the facility and in the seaport itself. In fact, there's been many studies, but a recent article in Security News highlighted the fact that cargo theft really is lies ashore rather than at sea. And it lies in these different modes of transport. But today, what we're most interested in, what we're focused on, are our fixed facilities, are our seaports. We lose about $40 billion, or it's been estimated, a year in crime-related activities. And what I like to think about on a seaport is to look at it as any large city that we have. The same types of crime, if you will, that happen in a large city can be found in a seaport. But we want to kind of narrow those down a little bit, I guess, if you will, and think about them more particularly in the seaport. The things that we see highlighted the most often are theft, drug and human trafficking, and of course the threat of a dirty bomb. Well, when we have this theft and we have this, we really want to think about security, because it addresses this area. And really the goal of maritime security is to prevent any unlawful operation within the port itself. So the security within the maritime domain, I like to look at it as everybody's responsibility. And we need a plan to follow. We got to have some direction. And that plan and the facility is called the Facility Security Plan. And that plan has a history. It comes from something. It comes from the Area Maritime Security Plan, which comes from the Area Maritime Security Committee. And we'll address that a little bit later here in the webinar. But it's important to follow that plan, because it's designed to protect not only the facility, but the ships, the people, the cargo it's in the facility itself. So the Area Maritime Security Committee is really a committee that's made up of both local government agencies, as well as state and federal members, alongside the facility operators and the seaport governance, and also headed up by the Coast Guard captain of the port. So the port stakeholders participate in this to help develop the Area Maritime Security Plan, which eventually results in their own facility security plans. Now, these plans have some key areas that we have to be aware of. And these areas highlight themselves in access control, the restricted areas, cargo handling, delivery vehicles, and monitoring. All of these things are key to making sure the seaport is safe and secure. But really, I wanted to point out in the monitoring that something that's relatively new on the scene that we begin to think about are the use of and monitoring of drones or unmanned aerial surveillance or unmanned aerial systems. So we take a look at drones and we see them. How are they used on the port? What can they be done? How can that help us, or does it hinder us at all? We have to be aware of both sides. And so I just put down a couple areas that are just kind of basic areas that they can help in, as far as perimeter control and taking a look from the sky at restricted areas and the actual facility or the port buildings themselves. But also it could be going out and taking a look at a suspicious ship or cargo or people, or it could be that they're aiding in navigation. It's important to recognize, and this is kind of interesting, that this kind of the sea meets the sky with these systems. How would we use them? Is it important for us to have them, or are they a threat to the port itself? That's something to think about. And I think at this point, turn it back over to Michael. I think this might be a place for a quick survey.
Yeah, we've got a little poll that's going to fire up now, guys. So it'll launch. You should have an option on your screen to then answer and submit. And essentially, the question is based around whether you've ever considered the use of drones as a security tool within your maritime environment. Some of you on the call, this might not be applicable to, but do you already use drones? Would you consider using drones? You're not considering using drones, or it's not applicable. And the reason for the focus and the conversation around drones is many people actually see drones more as a threat than an actual security tool. I know on the flip side, when you're looking from the actual boat's perspective or cargo ships, drones are definitely seen more as a threat to their actual existence. Whereas for the ports, this might be something that changes the game a little bit with regards to seeing them more as a security tool. So I think pretty much most people have voted. We're up to 65% of the vote. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results on screen. So 4% of our audience, Fred, are already using drones. 50% would consider, and 8% are not. The other 30%, it's not applicable to them. So a big number, 50%, would actually consider using drones as a security solution. So I think it's something that we should follow up with post this session to maybe provide a little bit more information on how drones can be used, and also information on how they can maybe look at training for those types of situations. So Fred, I've stopped sharing that. I'm going to hand back over to you. But quickly, Fred, did you suspect that with regards to the use of drones, it wasn't something that's being widely used?
I suspected that it wasn't widely used because I think it's one of the technologies that might be slow in the adapting process. It's important to understand that when you're using that, just giving you another piece of information for security awareness, and it really requires you to have you begin to have a pretty robust security operations center, if you will, to understand these types of informations, to correlate them all together, and to make decisions on them. So I think that opens us up into the world of artificial intelligence and how we make decisions, and that's important to use. There are platforms now that we are introducing into the port security that allows us to do this. There's a lot of research being done with this, with drones and actually countering drones within the Department of Homeland Security, within the Science and Technology branch. And it's an area that I think we're moving into. Of course, the Department of Defense has moved into it already, and are using them in a big way. So I think it's important for us to recognize, and that poll is kind of where I thought it would be.
Sure, no problem. Back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Well, let's take a look at a moment at kind of what drives things in the United States is in security, and I wanted to highlight the Port Security Grant Program that's run by the Department of Homeland Security, and it's an important program for us in securing the seaports because it really gives us some of the funding to help mitigate the vulnerabilities that we find when we do a facility security assessment and see some of the areas that we might be lacking. And I wanted to address within this program maybe a couple of items that I think are important for us to recognize. And one is in the cyber security area. Cyber technology is used throughout the port, throughout the facilities in the port. And it's important for us to understand that and know that and realize that the connectivity could be hardwired or wireless, but it can still be subject to cyber attack. And it's important for encryption. It's important for us to understand this. And just something, Michael, you talked about lighting, and it's important to maybe note that in the lighting control systems, which are really key to the lighting on a seaport, how they're set up, no matter if they're wireless or hardwired, they're susceptible to cyber attack. we need those control systems and lights are important because the facility is using that to in the schedule of ship's arrival. And say the ship is delayed a little bit, they want to change that control system. They have to make a change to that, and when they do the lighting, the maximum lighting occurs obviously when they're unloading and loading the ship, and they want to make sure that they're safe and secure in that area. So it's important for us to recognize this idea of cybersecurity within the secure areas of the port and applications, but also understand that it applies to the safety applications as well. And by that, I would just highlight a couple areas like fire detection, general alarm systems. Those systems are generally also wireless systems, and some are hardwired, but they're all subject to cyber attack. So we have to be aware of that. And I just wanted to point that out. It's an area sometimes that we miss in our thinking about security. And understand.
Fred, on the cybersecurity front, it's interesting you mentioned lighting controls, because actually, very, very recently, we're working on a massive project right now. I won't name the port, and part of their requirements was to actually support them in fixing their lighting controls because they were hit by a cyber attack. Now, it's over 2 years ago when they were hit by this cyber attack, and since then, they haven't gone back in and been able to remotely control their lighting system via the advanced control system that they actually had. So it's a perfect example. Doesn't really matter the size of your port, that cyber attacks are real and they can affect the entire port area in so many different ways. And for us as a lighting company, the lighting control solution, we have history of where we've seen that happen. So it's a really, really important aspect.
Oh yeah, well, thanks, Michael. That's a great point, and just let me say, and it's maybe an obvious point, but if the ship comes in and it can't unload because you can't get the lights on, basically, that's a problem. I mean, obviously the ship's making money when it's in transport, when it's in transit, when it's at sea. It doesn't want to be in port very long. The turnaround is critical, and so that's why it's important to have the, if you will, the lights or the area illuminated when it needs to be. Great point. Well, to help the ports in that is the Department of Homeland Security has the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Now, that's kind of a mouthful, and it's but basically they are there to assist the seaport and the facility with the cybersecurity framework that would give them guidance and how they would set up their cyber plan, and in the analysis of those vulnerabilities and how they would guard against them. So it's important I just wanted to point that out. There's help out there, and there's a way to get it. Also within the Seaport, it's Port Security Grant Program. Another key area, if you will, is in the what I call it, or they call it soft targets, crowded places, physical security enhancements. And I look at the cargo, the cruise, and the ferry terminal, and I call that back to the basics. And the reason I say back to the basics is when you think of security basics, you think of, okay, how am I going to fence the area? How am I going to restrict the area? So I talk about fencing. How am I going to light up the area? I talk about lighting. I talk about the basics of screening people and baggage. I talk about the basics of, if you will, of security cameras and in that area. And I just wanted to point out that if you're using premium equipment, I call it the top of the line. If you're really going after the best stuff in this area, you can do the basics, and you can make a huge dent into your vulnerability, into your risk mitigation, if you will. And the port security grant process recognizes that, so they can help ports and facilities fund areas and fund projects in all of these areas to help that. And specifically, if we talk about enhanced lighting, I think that's an area that we can make some huge, if you will, a headway in. Because if we think about the city, go back to the city again and think about the port is like a large city. And you think about in a city to reduce crime, they turn on the lights, if you will. You know, they try to keep as much of the area at night lit up as possible. And there's is a proven fact that lighting reduces crime. But it's something that people don't necessarily think about is lighting also reduces the fear of crime. And that's a huge benefit. And that's something that we need to take a look at and understand on the port facility itself. And again, there's a financial benefit to that because if you're reducing crime, you're reducing theft, you're reducing, you have a financial benefit of that. And it's important to understand the enhanced lighting can provide that. And so when we talk about enhanced lighting, we move into the area of LED lighting or white light. And that's important for us to understand all the studies that have gone on. And Michael, you might want to comment on this, but really have pointed out that there's a huge increase in the facial recognition ability. And so that means a person that's in a monitoring situation in an operations center can really identify the threat and identify the people better. And they can do it at a further distance than it ever could have been done before with the cameras because of this enhanced lighting as compared to the sodium lighting. And it's a great way to do business. You know, there's additional benefits. I mean, I won't even get into the fact of the savings in the electric bill, if you will. But Michael, you want to comment?
Yeah, and I think from our perspective, we know that across the board, across all our applications and sectors, lighting is a huge additional piece of security for the sites. And as you said, linking it to the city view is absolutely clear. And it's everything from not only just being able to see much better on CCTV, but it reduces that fear of crime for your employees as well. There's a great study, which I'll link to in the post session, regarding white light and facial recognition, which helps sort of clarify some of the main points. There's also a really great tool. Again, I'll share this in the post session notes from the International Labour Office in Geneva, which is a safety and health in ports document that offers guidelines for how maritime environments should be working. And there's some really great sections in there that not only cover off some of the topics you've been speaking about, Fred, but also cover off the importance of lighting and how best to situate lighting. So I will share that study as well afterwards. We actually have a poll that I want to quickly fire up again. So I'm going to do that right now. And if everybody looks back at their screens, this is specifically based around lighting. And it's to understand whether, there's 4 questions actually, whether you've actually ever considered lighting as part of your security review. And Fred, you talk about lots of different aspects in the opening of this slide with regards to security, but I'm wondering whether lighting has ever actually come into the mindset of people with regards to whether it forms part of their security processes on site. And then if you have, or if you haven't upgraded your yard or your crane lighting in the last 5 years, importantly, have you even measured your illumination levels in the last 12 months? Because when it comes to security, it's no good having lights that have depreciated so much that they're not actually doing the job that they were aimed for. And finally, have you ever had any security or safety attributes that have actually been attributed to lighting in, say, the last 24 months? Because it's a very common occurrence that we see that when accidents happen within the maritime environment, one of the first things people say is, I just couldn't see. And it really is important that your lighting is up to scratch to make sure you can avoid issues with regards to safety as well as security on site. So we've got almost 60% of people have voted. So I'm going to end the polling and share the results with everybody live and see what the results are. So a massive 74% do consider security lighting as part of their review, which is great to hear. And it's something that we'll talk about a little bit later when you talk about key takeaways. And then, you know, a lot of people, it looks, in the last 5 years have started to upgrade their lights. people, it seems, are a little bit maybe lax with regards to measuring their illumination levels. And I think it's an important aspect that should always be considered. And it looks around, 22% have had security or safety issues that have been attributed to lighting, and 35% haven't. So a real mixed bag of results from everybody on that poll there. But I think it just shows that lighting is a critical aspect of security. And lots more to come on that in the email I'll send out post this session. Fred, I'm going to just hand back over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. And we'll just pick up another, what I think is a key area of their port security grant program, and something that they highlight, and I want to highlight, and sometimes we forget about it. And I want to talk about the port employee. The people working on the seaport, I think, may not have a huge impact in the overall security of the operation. In other words, security is not their specific job, but they are, and I think you'd recognize this, they are the eyes and ears of the facility. So training them in maritime security awareness is key. And I think doing that early on can pay big dividends into keeping your facility safe and secure. And I think it's a very inexpensive way to help mitigate your vulnerabilities, because your people, no matter what they work in or where they work in, they're all around the port every day. And so what they see and what they hear is important for them to understand and recognize and be aware of the security aspects. So that's very key. And there's a lot of good training. The programs, there's one that in particular I think is the most comprehensive for the U.S. training. Port.training.com is something, and Michael, we'll make sure we send that out in the notes after the seminar to everyone on how to access that within the U.S. But also we're going to be in the same idea with that kind of online training, working with through Midstream to have the same type of capability as Michael addressed in the beginning of this webinar, that Midstream is interested in working with the port and facilities with a total complete solution, if you will, and be a kind of a one-stop shop. And so we want to be able to help you in the training aspects as well. So that's going to be very important.
Fred, with regards to training, is there any government support available to ports and maritime industry to help? Because you mentioned earlier that there is support and there is grants available, but would that also cover training of staff, for example?
Yes, that actually covers training of all the people in the facility. In the United States, we're able to do that within any waterside facility and any port, any of the 361 deep water ports. We're able to use those training funds for everyone on the facility. So you can do the maritime security awareness training. You can train your security officers. You can train your facility security officer, and all of those areas.
And are there any sort of advice or guidelines with how often you should be looking at providing training and awareness to your employees on site, whether it's security courses that the security officer might go on once every year, once every 5 years? Is there a framework that sort of advises when facilities should be thinking about doing training? Because obviously we mentioned drones earlier. It's a completely new technology. Now, if you're not constantly looking at training and retraining, potentially you won't have been able to have access to the information regarding those particular aspects. So are there guidelines every year, every 2 years, or is there anything you could potentially suggest to put in place?
Yeah, I mean, my recommendation, and that's a good question, but my recommendation as far as the basic maritime security awareness training, this is online. And by the way, I'm talking about all of these courses as they're comprehensive online type information. So it's something that's relatively easily accessible. But I think the basic course, which is the Maritime Security Awareness, is something that should be done every 2 years. I believe it's that important because you have turnover in people in the facility, and it's good to update even the people that remain to be in the facility.
Okay, great. Thanks, Fred.
Okay, so if we moving along in that, I think we're down to kind of get into our more summary areas, and I like to always at the end maybe think about what did I take a look at, what have I learned, or what are some things that I need to make sure I understand. And I want the number one thing is to understand a port is like a city with a similar range in crime. And when you think about that, I go back to the basics and I think about more lights equal less crime, okay? Or better lighting, if you will. Better illumination equals less crime, and the fear of crime. And that's important to understand that for our people. Secondly, understand that in the facilities and shoreside, we have cargo theft, and it's important to know that. We lose billions of dollars every year in that. And so we need to make sure we address it. If we have a more secure facility, we're going to have less theft. That's a given. And cybersecurity is important to the marine transportation system. It's something that can shut the system down, and we don't want that to happen. As Michael brought up that recent example, of a facility that had a cyber attack in their control system, in the lighting system. That's something that we have to be aware of. There's so many things on the port that are subject to cyber attack that we need to be aware of. And then port employee training. Can't emphasize it enough. It's an easy thing to do, and it's important. Some of our ports are set up so that when you get a port badge issued, you can't get the badge issued unless you've completed the Maritime Security Awareness Training Program. And that's an easy program to take. It's online. It's a very, very easy training. It takes about an hour to complete. And they make that requirement, and it's all tied to a learning management system that the port has access to. And so if they're inspected by the captain of the port, they can produce their training records, and each individual training record can be printed out, and it can follow the port employee wherever he goes, in whatever facility he is assigned to. And finally, always think about back to the basics when you think of port security. Think about those items that you can secure. Think about access control and monitoring. And of course, today we're zeroing in specifically on enhanced lighting. That's something that maybe can be easy to do, and it keeps your seaport more safe and secure. So those are kind of the takeaways. And Michael, I think that's drawing us down towards the end.
There's a couple of questions actually.
Oh yeah, okay.
Just as you were on that last slide, somebody's come in and asked, what is the most effective single tool a port could introduce to improve the security of their facilities? So you've obviously got these 6 key takeaways, but in your opinion, what would be the sort of single most effective tool that they could actually focus on?
What my experience has been, the single most effective tool is training. I believe that we have, and I've actually seen a port shut down years ago because of this, but and it was a key point. I won't mention the name, but it was because the port facility personnel were not adequately trained in maritime security awareness. And I think to recognize that they are the key eyes and ears of the port is the most important thing.
Okay. And then someone actually, because you mentioned it earlier with regards to weapons of mass destruction, but terrorism, is obviously a huge part of sort of a security conscious environment. How big a part to play does that have in the risk assessments and the security advice that you're giving to all these ports that you work with?
Well, I think it's important to understand that that the weapons of mass destruction is something, and I think about threat reduction. I think about the idea that if you could that you have the proper, if you address that as sort of the highest risk item, and to mitigate that, you have automatically mitigated all of these other items, which fall under the more of the cargo theft area, human smuggling, drug interdiction, that kind of area. So if you are targeted with the proper equipment towards the mitigating of weapons of mass destruction, which means that you're able to be able to physically guard against that, you're going to automatically take in these other items.
Sure. And I think, interestingly, when it comes to security, though, there must be a level whereby, because you've got a lot of points in here, there's a lot of information about all these aspects that ports and will need to bring in or should have in. But when does sort of too much security, cause an operation to slow down? Is there ever a thing, I suppose, of too much security?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because what happens is, I believe, is you get what I call information overload, and you're in this area of your operations center or your security center, if you will, which a lot of times is located, along with the access control area, and people can become overwhelmed fairly quickly. It causes you actually to lose security. You become not secure because you're missing items. And so I think you want to be able to have information, but have it so you can make decisions on it, if you will.
Sure.
And that's why an area that I think is an area that's new in the port security world would be the artificial intelligence, or the ability to make decisions being based on algorithms, if you will, or software that weighs all of the various mitigating circumstances and helps that person make that decision.
I think as well, thanks, Fred, for that. The comparison between, let's say, airports, obviously a massive area that Midstream works in, and ports, it seems to me that there is a lot of focus and hyper-focus on airport security, where employees, visitors, there seems to be a huge focus that airports are extremely, I would say, well-funded or focused on security. Is it very similar in the maritime environment at ports, or would you say that actually, as an industry and sector ourselves, that actually we're lagging behind a little bit with regards to the aviation sector and on how secure our sites are? Where would you position us?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and when you think about it, I think you're in airports, you're thinking about people, and you don't think about cargo as much. In seaports, you think about cargo and people less. And I believe we tend to, maybe, if we think about people, we think about we get real excited about security, and we think about cargo, we don't get as excited. And so the seaports might be lagging behind somewhat in that area. So it's something that we need to really be aware of and understand that is important. It's always this thing that you think, well, it takes one big incident in a seaport or a port facility to change everything. And so, but we don't want that incident to happen. We want to prevent that incident. So that's why we need to make sure that we're very, very secure. And let me just add to that I think, I said training is so important to that, and it is. But I can't overemphasize also just the basics of it. just the basics. Sometimes we get a little lax in the basics, but you know, we need to make sure our fence and our perimeter is secure. We need to make sure that the restricted areas are fenced off and are secure. We need to make sure that we have the proper access control, and we need to make sure that we illuminate the port in the proper manner.
Yeah, and I think that interestingly, there's so many topics that you could have really gone into depth with on this webinar. And I think that it's a real nice lead into this next slide with regards to what you're about to talk about, Fred, in terms of, you know, what the facilities might actually need.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it could be any number of things. This is just a little quick summary, but of things that we can help with. But you know, you start with an assessment. You know, really, where are you? You need to find out where you are. You need to measure that against a plan and see and take a look at your assessment. What are your vulnerabilities? Do you need to update your plan? That's something that needs to be updated every year. You know, how are your employees aware of what they need to understand in a security? Can they recognize something that's not right? You know, do they question a person supposed to be escorted without a port badge? Can they recognize that, or do they question that, or do they just let it go by? Your security officers and all of that training is important. You know, and we have the ability to assist in the grant application process, the investment justifications that need to be written, that we can help in to get additional funding. And I think, you know, finally this idea of the lighting system health check, that's kind of back to the basics. You know, where are you in your lighting area? What's going on? There's many more probably that can be put down here, but I think that'll give us a start.
Yeah, absolutely. And Fred, questions come in around actual the planning and design of port facilities, and the question is around when is the best time to consult or start thinking about your security aspects when you're actually planning and designing these facilities. You know, is this something that you should be thinking about right at the beginning of the process? Is it something that can be done at the end? When is the best phase to be thinking about security?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I've talked to the facilities about that in the past, but it's kind of hard to get them to do this. But I said, you know, you're about to add or to your facility. You're gonna increase the area, or you're either got a brand new facility on a waterside facility. I would like to begin I would like to be there at the very beginning of what goes on and how you're going to make it secure, because you know how you build and where you place that building, your perimeter, how you move traffic onto and off of the facility is so important. All of these are play into your security aspects. A lot of that is obviously is given by the location of the facility, but it's important to have that security advisor early on, so that you don't have to tear something down that you've already built and change it. Let's just do it right from the very get-go.
And you mentioned the security advisor there. So who actually should be taking the lead on the ports? Many ports we know do have sort of security officers, but who have you experienced and worked with? Who takes the lead when it comes on port security? Is it the
port security? Yeah, the lead person in port security is the facility security officer, the person that's designated as that, and he's the most, or he or she is the most highly trained person in that area, and they're the ones that really are charged with implementing the facility security plan. So that's a collateral duty to someone on the port. It could be the terminal manager, could be the facility security officer. And I know facilities that have that, and I know very large facilities that have that handle thousands of containers every day. And their general manager is their facility security officer. because and you might say, well, he's too busy to do it. Well, he's too busy not to do it. He's a person that's making sure that his facility is secure and ready to go. He understands the traffic patterns. He understands the loading and the unloading and all that has to be done. What better person? But the facility security officer takes the lead in this area.
And then, because you mentioned earlier as well, then you've got the Coast Guard, the Port Authority, and of course the police. How do they all then link round into the functioning of sort of these large ports?
Well, I think that it all comes together, if you will, with the Area Maritime Security Committee in the U.S. That's the key driving point, and that is headed up by the Coast Guard captain of the port, and then the Coast Guard and then we have the captain of the port has a marine inspection component that send Coast Guard personnel onto the facility to make sure that they are keenly aware of the security aspects of their facility, and they check the security plan, and they check with all the employees as how well they are trained in their security assessments. They check with the security officer and all the security officers, but it all comes together with the Area Maritime Security Committee and how they work together with all the stakeholders, if you will, in the port.
Thanks, Fred. Just moving on, we've got a couple more Q&A questions that I'll come to in a second as we're coming to the end of the session. Very, very quickly, everybody from the lighting industry or involved within lighting design in ports, we do have a webinar next Wednesday, May the 6th, all based around lighting design via Dilux for ports, terminals, and maritime equipment. It will give you a great view of how to design lighting for your facilities, and it obviously includes making sure that specific areas of the ports are lit correctly for security, safety, and operational aspects of the port. So I just wanted to, before we get to the end, make sure anyone who's joining knew about that webinar. The link will be included in the follow-up email. But Fred, a couple more questions before we finish off, because we've got maybe a few more minutes here. Someone's actually asked what the most complex security operation you've faced in your 35-year career is.
Oh, that one I got to think about a little bit. Yeah, that's a good question. I think let's see. I think it would probably be in a port and facility that was involved with a possibly with more of an expansion project, and how that would be, and how that project would be handled, and how you would secure the port with the access control, and because there was some space in between, or land in between, that wasn't controlled by the port, and how you tied all that together. So it involved the access control of two different facilities. It involved the monitoring of that. It involved the actual the idea of the perimeter of the port being very close to a section of the community of the city, if you will, and you had to make sure you understood that, take into account the community concerns, and then it involved the idea of the resiliency, or the ability of the port to withstand hurricane conditions, and how that affected the community and the port itself, and so it was we tied all that stuff together. It involved everything from illumination, if you will, and you want to illuminate areas, but you don't want to illuminate somebody's backyard. That's not part of the. So it was a kind of a complex operation, but in the end, I think what we brought together all the stakeholders, and the important part one of the important stakeholders was the actual community that that was right outside the port boundary.
Sure. Really great point there about stakeholders, because we've had a question come in which talks about nowadays, a lot of the time, the security is probably with an external company. Even if the port has maybe a security officer, some of the security elements are utilized via an external company. Whereas something like the lighting system is owned and run by the personnel in the terminal. So the question is, how do you in fact manage this process with different companies operating different aspects of the site? So you mentioned there key personnel. For you, in your experience, how have you made sure that all these elements, whether it's the lighting, whether it's the security guards, all these functions are actually pulled together?
Well, I think it's important to, what I always said is put all the liars in one room and then you get the truth. Well, it's important when you're doing these projects. You're exactly right. We have a lot of people. One thing I start off with is I want to make sure that everybody involved in the project has a port badge. Now, what does that mean? Well, they're cleared. That means that they've had the Maritime Security Awareness course. I want to make sure we start out with the basics, that every contractor, every person involved understands security awareness. And I don't care what they're going to be doing on the port. And so we do that. And then when we get together, we try to show how all of the systems tie together and depend on one another. They're all interdependent, and we have to, and everyone needs to understand that. And the only way to do it is to make sure that we have these. Now, physically, we're having weekly meetings on making sure this happens. Sometimes it's daily meetings, if you will, to make sure that we understand who the stakeholders are and what effect they have on one another.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. And interestingly, you mentioned twice now, one with the security project that you did that involved the body of land or water between the ports. And you also mentioned something then regarding the tracking of people, or understanding the different groups of people that are in and around the port. Interestingly, in Asia, they're considering, and this is something that we've done some research on, the use of RFID tagging for personnel and visitors, so that people know where people are within the facility at all times, and they can be tracked around the facilities for safety and security purposes. Do you know whether any of that's being considered yet within the US market, whether it's been trialed or whether it's a new technology that is a bit like drones, that is something that is yet to really be implemented across the board?
I have to claim ignorance in that area as far as RFID tracking of personnel. Cargo, yes, and materials, yes, but the actual personnel, no.
Sure. Okay. No, it's an interesting piece of new technology that might be something to consider for a future session. So that actually brings us to the very end of our session today. Thank you so much for everybody who's joined. Please, if you can, give us feedback. There's a 4-question survey. It will pop up in a second browser, and we really appreciate the feedback on how we can progress and bring more webinars to you and topics that you might like. I want to say a massive thank you to Fred. Really appreciate you joining and offering your guidance and advice on security aspects. We'll make sure that any questions that came in, Fred and I can get back to and answer to everybody who joined today. And obviously all the links and all the information that's been provided, we will supply post this session in the follow-up email. So thank you once again to Fred. Thank you to everybody who joined us from all around the world, our partners, clients, and peers of the industry. And we look forward to seeing you on another one of our webinars in the future. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, Fred. Thanks.
Thank you.